This is a native host for quandongs and sandalwood. It's a casuarina tree. It's one of the few non-leguminous trees that produce nitrogen, and sandalwood and quandongs like nitrogen. They do from their host trees. Not all their host trees make nitrogen, but they certainly need some nitrogen. So if you've got a stand of casuarina trees, think about growing some quandongs and sandalwoods nearby. And casuarina trees attract cockatoos as well, and parrots. Carob trees are an introduced leguminous species. They're not a native species, but they're leguminous and they're not toxic, so they may well be a suitable host tree for quandongs and sandalwoods. I think this might be an intersex one. No, it's a male one. It's a male. Nevertheless, it's a leguminous tree and may well be a good host for sandalwoods and quandongs, for the santalum species. Gladizias are another edible species that could be used possibly as a host for quandongs and sandalwoods. They're introduced. They're from America, aren't they? Gladizias. They were eaten by dinosaurs, I think, these pods. And this is a thornless variety, an enormous one, but they're leguminous, so they may well be good permaculture host species for our santalums like sandalwoods and quandongs. Plus, you get the edible beans as well. Can be used as stock feed or ground into flour and all sorts of things. All around this huge carob tree are possible sites for growing quandongs and sandalwoods. You've got all these leguminous trees, roots in the ground, to act as host. So we may as well try all that beautiful leguminous host tree. Here we have Shotia afra from South Africa, the Hottentot bean. It has edible beans. It's a leguminous tree, very drought resistant, very frost resistant, can stand Australian conditions. But if you're in South Africa and want to try growing quandongs and growing sandalwood, you may as well try using Shotia afra, because they're probably a good host tree as well. Most legumes seem to be, but you don't want to use poisonous legumes. You want to use ones that are permaculture species, and you know that they have edible beans. Lovely Shotia afra. Here we have Shotia afra and carob trees growing side by side, an ideal location to try growing sandalwoods and quandongs right near them. Good idea. Look at all those carob blossoms. A forest here of Shotia afra. Shotia afra. Shotia afra. A whole forest of them. And carob growing beside. They're both leguminous trees, as far as I know, have edible beans, and thus are good host trees, in theory, for sandalwoods and quandongs. So in your dry climate permaculture forest, We'll have carob beans. Oh, carob beans here. Lovely carob beans on your carob tree. And in theory, you'll have some lovely quandongs growing underneath, or sandalwood knots growing underneath. A host plant. Well, nearby, not underneath, but nearby at least. Beautiful carob beans. Here a tree lucerne, used by some people as host trees for their quandongs and sandalwoods. You can grow them in the same pot when they're small. Aren't they lovely? So, tree lucernes are quite drought hardy, quite frost hardy, used as stock feed, a good host for santalum species. They fix nitrogen in the ground like wattle trees do. Good introduced species. Good host tree. Lovely tree lucerne. They have lovely white blossoms. And the blossoms attract honey eaters as well. So, in your quandong and sandalwood orchard, you could have a line of these tree lucernes. What's their special name? Tagasast, isn't it? Tagasasti or something. Anyway, it's tree lucerne. You could have a line of tree lucernes in your quandong and sandalwood nut orchard as host trees. Very useful. A forest of tree lucerne. I think these are Myopera montanum. Anyhow, santalums, quandongs and sandalwood use myoperums as host trees. There's one orchard in, there's an orchard, no, not an orchard, a nursery in South Australia that specialises in growing quandongs, and they use myoperum, some dwarf type of myoperum, as a host tree. They have it growing in the same pot. But these are big, tall Myopera montanums, I think, not some sort of small variety of Myopera. But anyhow, Myopera are springing up everywhere. Since Patterson's curse has disappeared, you've got more and more Myopera springing up all over the place. And they're good host trees for quandongs and sandalwoods. Here's a Myopera montanum, sprung up from a seed. So I put a bit of protection around it. Anyway, it's a good host tree to plant nearby your quandongs and your sandalwoods. And just here, but nearby, we have, I don't know if it's a quandong or a sandalwood, I'm not sure, growing nearby. So, also, we've got a wattle tree here, Acacia pendula. It's a sucker, so all the Acacia pendula roots are in the ground. Host trees. That brings us to wattle trees, acacia trees as host trees. This is a raspberry jam wattle tree. It's a type of tree used in Western Australian sandalwood plantations to grow, as a host tree. Raspberry jam wattle, so called because the timber smells like raspberry jam when you break the timber. And we have decided, I'm not sure what this tree is, whether it's a quandong or a sandalwood. It hasn't fruited yet, this one. Looks like it's going to at the end of this year. So we grow wattle trees as hosts. Acacia pendula is a very good host. For me it works anyway. It suckers everywhere. Every new sucker is a possible location. To plant your sentinel species nearby. See, here's a sucker. Here's a sucker of pendula, acacia pendula. And yes, oh yes, there's a quandong coming up. Another quandong growing near acacias. It's got another acacia growing near it. I think it's acacia salicina, this one. I think it's acacia salicina. Seems to be quite a tough tree. Drought resistant, frost resistant, and a good host tree. And growing underneath here, you've got another non-leguminous type host. I read online that these ruby saltbushes are supposed to be good host trees for quandongs and sandalwoods. Ruby saltbush, and they're coming up everywhere. Since Patterson's curse has disappeared, you've got ruby saltbush coming up everywhere too. And they're growing around these quandongs and wattle trees here. So you've got your host trees of wattles, but you've also got these shrubs, ruby saltbush shrubs coming up everywhere under the host tree as well. They're also hosts for quandongs, for when you plant them out, or for when you plant your quandongs. You have all these host trees nearby. Here's a big acacia pendula. Big acacia pendula surrounded by ruby saltbush hosts as well. And look, there's a sandalwood seed I've scattered. Must have been a few weeks ago. Let's push it into the dirt. There we are. Let's see what happens. The more seeds you plant, the more chances you've got. Here's a quandong or sandalwood. Quite a good specimen. Good sized specimen. And it's growing near an acacia stenophylla. It's spreading its roots under the ground. There's acacia stenophylla. Very tough acacia. I'm not sure if this is a sandalwood or quandong. What have we got there? A little grasshopper or something. But anyway, it's growing right under a pine tree. You hear that pine trees aren't suitable hosts for quandongs and sandalwoods, but the fact is, the big acacia pendula has its roots all underneath the pine tree. Everywhere under the pine tree, it's interwoven with sandalwood, with acacia. The acacia roots all interwoven with that pine tree. That means you can grow sandalwoods and acacias under a pine tree if those host roots are there. I'll show you. So under this pine tree we have a sandalwood or quandong. I'm not sure which because it hasn't fruited yet. All the pine needles. And also we have ruby saltbush interwoven. Ruby saltbushes are coming up interwoven under the pine tree. Interwoven with all the acacia roots. Quandongs and pine trees. So you could have a pine plantation with acacia pendula scattered all through it, and you could be having quandongs and sandalwoods as well, all in that giant plantation orchard. Why not grow pine nuts? pine tree everywhere with Quandong or santalum. Doing rather well. Let's pull it out. Doing rather well. There we have it. Oh, what's this? This is bridal creeper. I think I read it's a weed and it can get rid of quandongs. I've read that the sandalwoods in Western Australia can be endangered by this vine, so that's why it's pulling them out. But it's quite healthy and it's growing under pine trees. As I said, it's due to the big acacia pendula roots being interwoven under the pine tree. Quite a healthy specimen. It's getting bigger each year. There are so many different types of acacia, hundreds of types I think in Australia. This is Acacia etiophylla. Acacia etiophylla. Doing very well. Obviously a suitable host for quandongs and sandalwoods. Growing near the etiophylla, the Acacia etiophylla, there's a big ruby saltbush, another host for quandongs and sandalwoods. So I've learnt online, I've been doing a lot of research online. There's ruby saltbush just coming up under yet another sort of wattle tree here. Got wattle trees all over the place, all different sorts. The more wattle trees you have, the happier environment, the happier plantation you'll have, the happier orchard you'll have, what's suitable for quandong nuts and sandalwood nuts. Here's yet another wattle. Here's yet another wattle. I don't know what sort it is, but it's a wattle tree. Some sort of wattle tree here. Is it called wire-long wattle or something? Some sort of wattle tree. They don't all have compound leaves. Some have phyllodes instead. But it's another suitable tree, another suitable host. And this wattle tree is growing quite near. It's growing quite near Amyopora montanum, so you've got another host tree nearby for quandongs and sandalwoods. This one looks like an Acacia berliana, like nice decorative wattle with bluish purple leaves. Good host tree. They sucker a bit too as far as I can see. The more suckerings you have, the more junior new trees coming up. So if you've got wattle trees all over the place, as we do, you're going to have lots of locations where quandongs and sandalwoods can thrive. Even under the big pine tree. Where's the pine tree? Look how big it is. Even under that pine tree you can have sandalwoods and quandongs. This looks like Acacia cultriformis. It mightn't be a really long-lived wattle, but the more wattles you have, the more opportunities you have for your santalum species to have host friends. Here's a good sized quandong that fruited this last season. And just nearby we've got an Acacia pendula doing very well as a friend and host. Lots of baby quandongs. They won't be ripe until about September. They ripen from about September through to November. So they'll be fattening themselves up. They'll be ripe soon enough. Here are a couple of sandalwood seeds coming up in a pot. I've been planting sandalwood seeds all over the place, in pots, in the ground, all over the place to see where they might do well. Now, it's said that when you're growing sandalwoods in pots in a nursery situation, you can use couch grass and you can use clover. So I've been sprinkling clover seeds around, but this pot happens to have some, it looks like it's, what's that grass called? Serrated tussock, that's what it looks like. I've got a suspicion, I'm not a botanist, but I have a suspicion that serrated tussock might be a suitable host for quandongs. I have to wait and see. But these are coming up. These two sandalwoods are coming up. Here are two sandalwoods springing up in a pot. It was a pot I once had a passion fruit in a long time ago. But we've got two sandalwoods, and I've sprinkled the pot with clover seeds to act as host. They haven't come up yet, not there they haven't, but they will. There's a sandalwood coming up in a pot. There's some clover seeds coming up. That's not clover. This isn't clover, that's oxalis, I think. But I've inoculated all these pots with clover. There, young clover coming up. Clover coming up. Clover. Clover. I think that might be a young sandalwood just germinating. So it's all very exciting. It's very exciting. And I'm using clover as a host. Clover. So clover, you see. I'm using this old parsley dispenser. I've got all these clover seeds in there. You can use clover or couch grass. Clover leaves or couch grass to be your host in your sandalwood and quandong nursery pots. So what you do is you pepper your quandongs with clover. Very good idea, very easy idea to have a host plant in your pot straight away. A sandalwood coming up in an old cactus pot. There's an old sandalwood seed down there that wasn't successful. But there's sandalwood coming up in a cactus pot, and it's been peppered with clover seeds. This is Ficus religiosa. For fun, I've peppered this pot with clover seeds. There's some recent pepperings. There's some clover seeds coming up. And there's a sandalwood coming up. Just there. I think that's a young sandalwood. Just there, yes, just there. There it is. Look, lots of clover seeds have germinated. Only planted them about a week ago. And we've got here two sandalwoods, look. Two sandalwoods. And they're going to have clover for their host because there's only an old loquat tree seedling. There's only an old loquat seedling in this pot. I don't know if it's a suitable host, a loquat. But what we've got is just two sandalwood seeds and clover. That'll be fun. And look here. We've got clover coming up in that pot, in this nursery pot. We've got a sandalwood coming up. And in the same pot, we've got, what have we got? We've got a lucerne tree, a tree lucerne. That's what we've got coming up. So all these pots have got tree lucernes in them. Tree lucernes and clover seeds to act as host. Oh, this is the last one I'll show you. We have a sandalwood coming up. A lovely sandalwood tree growing with a tree lucerne. And there's plenty of other seeds planted and they'll all be coming up soon. There's some clover seeds waiting. And here's another tree lucerne. So it's all very successful if you grow the right hosts. Oh look there, there's another sandalwood coming up.